Welcome into another episode of the Mainly Hoops podcast. This episode, we're going to focus strictly on the mid-majors in the NCAA tournament. We're going to discuss our top five mid-majors in terms of, where we think they could potentially go on a run. We're going to go through five mid-majors that are sleepers in this tournament that could pull off some Cinderella runs that, we've seen over the last few years with some of these higher seeds. So we're going to jump right into it here. We've got our list of five ready to go. First one, UC San Diego, a team we've talked about a lot here. First round matchup with Michigan, and they win that one. They get the winner of Yale and Texas A&M for a chance to go to the Sweet 16. So pretty good path for them, in our opinion. But Cody, why don't you tell us why?
Yeah, I mean, this is a team we talked about a lot, and we talked about them a lot in the regular season too. So it's not like we're just coming about March Madness and it's like, oh, we really like this UC San Diego team. Like they're sitting at 30-4, and like obviously, yeah, it's been one of the more sexy 5-12 upsets. But then again, I don't really care. I've really loved this team all season long, and they're probably not considered like a deep sleeper, but it's definitely like my favorite mid-major to go on a deep run out of this entire mid-major crop that I think is really, really good. And it starts with this team's ability to turn you over. This defense is really, really good. They're second nationally in turnover rate on the defensive end, which is going to give them a ton of advantages against Michigan. And it can give, even like in potential rounds, like later rounds, it can give A&M problems. They've struggled with the ball pretty much all year long. So I do think there's a path for them to get to the Sweet 16 at least. Obviously, when if they go up against Auburn, it's probably going to be a tough matchup for them physically, especially they're not a super big front line, which would be the area of concern against Michigan as well. But I think the turnover rate is a little bit too much to ignore in that matchup. But they also defend the interior really well. They deny the rim at all costs as well. They're 19th in the nation in 2-point field goal percentage defense. So they've been really, really good in that area all year long. And Eric Olin is probably the most underrated coach in the entire country, probably him and another coach we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But I mean, he took this team from the Division III level and brought them all the way here to the Division I level in their first year of eligibility. And they went 30-4 this year and were 18-2 in the Big West, which was a really good league. And they kind of ran through this entire league. So it's really impressive. And then just a few player names to look out for. I mean, Anawanwa Tate Jones is going to be probably the household name. If they end up beating Michigan, he's going to be probably that March Madness Cinderella that everyone's looking for. He's kind of a point forward for this team. He sets everyone else up, including guys like shooters and Tyler McGuy and Hayden Gray, who shoot the ball at a very good clip. Hayden Gray at 42%, McGuy at 37%. And this offense overall is like, it looks a pretty clean offense outside of like the fact that they play a couple non-shooters at times, but they run a lot of dribble handoff action that if you can't defend it or have a tough time defending dribble handoff action, they'll kill you in that area. It's a lethal trio with those three. So yeah, definitely a team I really like and a team that I think can make a pretty deep run because I do think they have a fortunate path, at least up until the Sweet 16.
Yeah, that's really the thing, right? Like they do have a good path. They've beaten some good teams. Obviously, like they beat, another team in the field in Utah State earlier in the year by 2. They're a very well coached team, and have the guard play to do it, and force enough turnovers. But like you said, I think that their ceiling ultimately is Sweet 16, unless somehow like Auburn can get knocked off. Then maybe they have the potential to go a little bit further. But I think ceiling is Sweet 16 because Auburn's just going to be too much. But a Sweet 16 appearance in their first season in D1 or their first season eligible for the tournament would be, one heck of a season.
Yeah. I mean, this team kind of gives me Loyola Chicago vibes too. And like just the way they kind of run their offense and their defensive identity as well. Like they're probably not the same quality as that Loyola Chicago team that went to the Final Four, or even the team the next year that was like 12th in KenPom, which is ridiculous how good that team was. But this team, I mean, they keep the pieces together. They have all of the qualities to continue to go deep into the tournament and have success in the tournament and kind of run the Big West for years to come as long as Eric Olin's there.
Yeah, for sure. So our next team, High Point, they're taking on Purdue here in the first round. And we talked about it a little bit, or quite a lot actually, in our game preview, the advantages that they have in that matchup. Now, we also mentioned the wins that they had in the regular season. They took down UAB at home. They also took down North Texas at home, who were both, no slouch in the American. Both those games were at home, but UAB was, not too far off from being in this tournament after facing off with Memphis the other day in the American Championship. So this High Point team certainly has some serious advantages or areas to exploit here against Purdue, who really struggles, as we've talked about, to defend the rim. And that's really an area where High Point is successful, right? They're an efficient offense from the three-point line, 36.6%, but they're top 15 in the country in two-point field goal percentage. And as we also discussed, Purdue's defense in terms of close twos, meaning I think less than 5 feet from, they're allowing 70.7% shooting. Just a staggering number. And I think leads me to believe that High Point really could go on a run here. I don't know whether or not I really believe in them to win more than one game, especially if it's Clemson that they see. I'm not really sure they can hang with Clemson. Maybe they can hang around, but I just think Clemson is too good of a team. But regardless, I think High Point's in a really good spot to pull off a 13-4 upset here in the first round.
Yeah, this High Point team is really intriguing, especially on the offensive side. They rank 29th in adjusted offensive efficiency in the entire country per Torvik, and they don't really have any weaknesses on that end. They shoot the crap out of the ball. They take care of the rock. They're top 50 nationally in turnover rate. They get on the offensive glass, led by 7-footer Jocelyn Bodo. He has an 18% offensive rebound rate, which is easily one of the highest offensive rebound rates in the entire country. And this team has former power conference talent on their roster. Former 4-star guard Bobby Pettiford, who was at Kansas, since he's the sixth man on this team. So kind of just goes to show all of the offensive talent that they have. Texas Tech transfer Demorian Williams, Kamani Hamilton's here, Keza Gifa. He's been a good shooter for this team this year. He's been pretty solid. And Chase Johnson as well, who's probably the best shooter on this roster. He's shooting at 43% from three. So their spacing, if you can't cover all of their spacing, if you have like true defensive holes on your defense, I think, and Purdue has plenty of them. I mean, they don't defend the rim well when teams get there, and they give up a lot of unguarded threes, like we talked about in our game preview. And I think High Point has all of the facilities to expose them in that area. And I guess there is a path for them to beat either McNeese or Clemson. Like McNeese could sort of be live against Clemson. We don't really love the matchup there, but I think the upside of this offense, I think, gives them a real chance to go on a little bit of a run. Obviously, the defense is a concern, but they do have a 7-footer up front, and it's an analytically driven defense. They run teams off the 3-point line, force you to win in the mid-range. So if teams are inefficient and they can keep you off of the glass, they do have a pretty solid 2-point defense. So I guess there is a path with their efficient half-court offense, especially. They don't rely on transition either. Like they can operate in the half-court at an elite rate, which is huge in March Madness. So yeah, I think this team has a lot of upside to potentially win a couple games here. Ultimately, the defense will end up being their downfall at some point in this tournament, but they can easily beat Purdue.
Yeah, definitely. And right, you mentioned the offensive rebound rate, 58th in the country in offensive rebound rate. They have 5 guys individually with an offensive rebound rate greater than 8.1%, which is pretty staggering. And Purdue, not a team that exactly rebounds the ball very well on the defensive end. They just lack a ton of size and physicality there. They're sitting at 185th in the country in defensive rebound rate. So definitely a spot, I think, where High Point can expose Purdue a little bit and their defensive issues. But that leads us into our next team, the Liberty Flames, taking on Oregon here in the first round.
Yeah, I mean, the Liberty Flames are a team that's not been a mainstay in the tournament, but they've always been in the hunt, and their play style is very intriguing in a tournament setting. They grind the game to a halt, basically against everyone. Their one concern is their lack of size, but their defensive scheme allows them to be okay in that area. They do a good job on the defensive glass. It's like a modified pack line scheme that is run from Tony Bennett. Richie McKay, the coach here, kind of deploys a lot of similar things that Tony Bennett ran, and we know how good Tony Bennett defenses have been in the past. So, and they rank 40th in defensive efficiency this season. They're a really good 3-point defense, third nationally in 3-point defense at 28%. And I like Liberty so much here because they're playing a very vulnerable 5 seed in Oregon, who I think is playing way over their heads lately. They don't really fascinate me in any areas. They don't really do anything well. They don't do anything all that poorly, but they don't do anything that dominant to where they can beat Liberty with their size. Like Biddle and Kwame Evans are big up front, but they're not all over the offensive glass. So I'm not super worried about that for Liberty in that area. So overall, I just think this is a Liberty team that's kind of due to get over the hump and potentially win a couple tournament games. I think they have a decent path to do so against a vulnerable Oregon team. And then Arizona in the second round, I think they have a chance. If you slow Arizona down, you have a really good chance of winning. We've seen this Arizona team try to operate in a half-court setting in past NCAA tournaments. It just doesn't seem like Tommy Lloyd has much of an area to go when he's not able to run in transition at a high rate. So the size would become a concern at that point against Arizona. They're super big up front, dominate the glass, but this Liberty team, they run beautiful sets in the half court, which is something I always love. They can control pace, which is huge in a tournament setting. So yeah, I really do like this Flames team.
Yeah, I think the offensive efficiency is going to be the key here. They take care of the ball at an elite rate, and they score the ball very efficiently. Like effective field goal percentage, they're second in the country. That's no mistake. They get great shots, and they shoot the three at an extremely efficient rate and shoot a lot of them. So, I really like this Liberty team. Pretty down on the Oregon team, right? I don't know what's the spread sitting at.
7.5 right now, which I think is absolutely crazy.
Torvik has this projected at Oregon minus 1.5, 2, which is crazy, right? So, I like Liberty to win the game. Definitely at 7.5 plus 7.5 just feels like stealing, but maybe Oregon continues to play well. I just don't see it. But our next team brings us to VCU, a team we've also talked a lot about. VCU takes on BYU here in the first round, and to me, I think this VCU team has the potential to go on a bit of a run here. I think they could definitely get to the Sweet 16. They have the path to do so. Led by their defense, but also different from other seasons. They do have some offense, right? They haven't shot the ball fantastically this season. They're 190th in 3-point percentage, but like you've pointed out, Cody, right? They have the shooters to do so, and they have the ability to get hot, and they do. it's obviously like their defense is their calling card as always. And I think that sets up pretty well here to take down a BYU team that relies heavily on the three, and VCU, a team that defends the three very well at 22nd in the country in three-point field goal percentage defense, despite, allowing, they don't allow a ton of threes, right? They run teams off the line pretty well, 63rd in the country in three-point rate, I guess. So I really like this VCU team. Initially, I was kind of like pretty high on BYU. I was pretty high on them coming into the Big 12 tournament because they've been playing so well, but I'm not exactly sure this is the 11th seed that they wanted to see.
No, definitely not. This is the 11th seed that nobody wanted to see. I guess Drake would be the other one. Actually, we'll talk about them in a second here. But this VCU team, coached by Ryan Odom, he's done a fantastic job at every stop. Former America East legend that UMBC won that as a 16 seed over Virginia for the first time ever. So he's obviously equipped to great coaching jobs, and he did a great job at Utah State as well. And this is a really good roster as well. I mean, the guard play here is very good. It's power conference level guard play led by Max Shulga, Philip Russell, Joe Bamisil, and Zeb Jackson, who has been solid throughout his career. And they do have shooting talent. They obviously haven't. The percentage isn't really there. They're shooting at 33.5% this season. But, I mean, there are guys that are shooting a little bit below expectation this year, like Zeb Jackson shooting 30%. Joe Bamisil, who has been a good shooter throughout his career, has only shot at 31% this year. So there's technically some shooting regression coming their way. And they've shot it well, like extremely well in stretches this season. They had a 5-6 game stretch where they shot close to 50% from three. So they clearly have the ability to get hot, and that only creates more upside. When this team's making shots, they're genuinely like a top 15 team in the country because their defense is so good. And in this matchup, especially against BYU, like you said, they can run teams off the 3-point line. They really value guarding every single catch and shoot three. And even when they give them up, they don't give up very many of them. They play drop coverage, force you to operate in the mid-range and at the rim. They're an elite rim defense led by Christian Furman and Luke Bamgoye, who they just have a ton of length up front, both of them over 7-foot wingspans, standing 6'10" apiece. It's a super impressive, super athletic and lengthy team across the board. And they absolutely have the upside. I really like the matchup in the first round. Wisconsin will be a tricky one for them, but I think they can run them off the 3-point line as well. So there's definitely a path for them to get to the Sweet 16, even against Alabama down the road. If they play them in the Sweet 16, like you can run Alabama off the 3-point line, and VCU has a great rim defense as well. Obviously, the glass would be an issue, which the glass is an issue against BYU as well. But if they can do a good enough job there, they can get hot from three. This could be another VCU Final Four team. Like, that wouldn't shock me at all. Like, this team is that talented and that good on the defensive end. So, I really do like this Rams team.
Yeah, and also, right, VCU's defense turns teams over a ton, and in that, where they have the disadvantage on the glass, maybe this is a team where they can turn them over a ton, right? I mean, BYU's they're 207th in offensive turnover rate, and VCU's 27th in the country in defensive turnover rate, right? So we've seen BYU be very vulnerable, especially with when they see heavy pressure against like physical defensive teams, right? Iowa State in particular, I go back to that game. 29 turnovers is something I've never even seen. They still managed to win that game because they made 18 threes, but against a VCU team that runs you off the line, doesn't allow a ton of catch and shoot opportunities, which is where BYU thrives, right? I think that VCU is going to heat the ball up, force them to put it on the deck, force them to make plays, and guys who aren't typically used to making plays, right? Like Richie Saunders has shown growth there, but I think they can force him into having to make some decisions. Like Boscovich, he's not a guy that wants to put it on the deck. He's been shooting it pretty well lately, shot it well last week in the Big 12 tournament. And then like Demon, he's had his turnover issues, pretty loose with the ball. They do have some veteran guys that do take care of the ball a little bit, but they don't like the pressure. They like to be comfortable, and you're going to be anything but comfortable against VCU.
Yeah, they press at one of the highest rates in the country, and they're elite when they do it. And then, yeah, we've seen it all year long, really, with BYU. Ever since they played Houston that first time, they really struggled with pressure. In that second game against Houston, they looked like completely lost on the offensive end. And, VCU can do similar things with their pressure defense. They'll, even in the half court, applying pressure, forcing you to push your offense out to 30, 35 feet. It's going to make it really tough on BYU. So I do expect VCU to win that first game. They're like a 3-point dog in that game, and I could easily see them going on a deep run with their talent.
Yeah, for sure. This brings us to our last team, Drake Bulldogs. They're a team who's had some success, and that's really because of their pace, right? They keep the possession count low. They play, I believe, the slowest pace in the country. 58 possessions a game, right? They keep the possession count super low, and that's an area where you can slow teams down, force them to play a way they typically don't have to play, right? And when that happens, they get a little bit, they press a little bit, especially if they're not making shots. Maybe Drake forces them into some turnovers. They start stressing out a little bit because Drake. There aren't that many possessions in a Drake game, right? You have to value each possession, because as each possession goes by, that's one less you're going to get the rest of the game, because Drake's going to go hold it for 25 seconds, and if they get a good shot and score, right, you're just digging yourself a deeper hole. So I think a matchup with Drake is a little bit daunting. Regardless, I do think like Missouri poses some issues for them, as we've talked about in our game preview. But if Drake can keep this game in a low possession count and not like play to what Missouri wants, I could definitely see Drake going on a little bit of a run here.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Drake can beat pretty much any team in the country. They can make any team in the country feel extremely uncomfortable. And yeah, it is because of their style of play, their super slow pace, their ability to turn you over. They win the rebound battle, and they win the shot volume battle in general, because they get to the free throw line at a super high rate. And yeah, they're 11th nationally in free throw rate in the entire country, which is super impressive for a low major team to like assert their dominance the way they do. And yeah, they got on the glass against everyone they played, like even against power conference competition. I know they played Miami, like that's kind of a disgrace of a power conference team this season, but 44% offensive rebound rate against Miami. And then they played Vandy in the championship game of the Charleston Classic, 54% offensive rebound rate against a power conference front line, although it's like one of the weaker ones. Like they got all over the glass against them. They showed that they can play up. They beat Vandy by double digits early in the season. So yeah, that game was played a little bit of a faster pace than they wanted to, and they still won that game. So yeah, super impressive. And yeah, the offense led by Bennett Starks, who's played 98.7% of Drake's minutes this season. Like I believe he's played over 40 minutes a game, which because they played like 5 or 6 overtime games. So he's actually averaged over a regular timed college basketball game, which is crazy. I think that's only happened like 3 other times in the history of college basketball. So really crazy that those guys haven't worn down throughout the course of the year, and they went through the conference tournament, played back-to-back days, and were able to win. Like they have a ton of durability on this roster because there's not a lot of depth, and they're not really willing to play that depth anyway. But yeah, Bennett Sturts is, he's the head of the snake on the offensive end. They run a lot of pick and roll through him, like just basically continuous pick and rolls, trying to put him in good spots to score until the shot clock gets down to 4 or 5 seconds. And, he either works in isolation or finds Mitch Muscari off of a screen, and he is able to make an open 3-point look or even a contested 3-point look from 30 feet. These guys are tough shot makers, and Bennett Starts late in the clock, late in the game, is probably one of the best guards in the entire country. And I mean, he's only a junior. He's going to be back next year as well. So yeah, this team really impressive. Not the most talented team. There's a lot of non-shooters on this roster. They'll all play 3 non-shooters on the floor at a time, but all 3 of those guys are really good rebounders. So yeah, they can win the shot volume battle. And Bennett starts as a closer, and they play super slow. So there's a real chance they can go on a run. I don't love their matchup with Missouri in the first round, but if they can slow down Missouri, I think they can have a really good chance of winning that game as well.
Yeah, no, and to look ahead, right? If they see Texas Tech in the second round, if they can slow that game down, and we've talked about Texas Tech being very 3-point reliant, if they slow it down and Texas Tech isn't shooting it well, and they start pressing a little bit, that's prime recipe for success in creating an upset. So, I think they could certainly get to the Sweet 16. If the things go right. But this game, they're really going to need to take care of the ball. That's going to be their number one thing. If they can take care of the ball here against Missouri and keep the possession count down, they have a real shot. So, we'll see. I think Sweet 16 is probably their ceiling.
Yeah, I would agree. Once you get to that point, I mean, maybe it opens up to where they don't have to play. Who is that? That's the St. John's region. Maybe they don't have to play St. John's. Like, maybe there's an open path. Like, we've seen these like really good mid majors go on runs. Like I point to Loyola Chicago again. Like you get a fortunate path. They can play up against pretty much any power conference team, and the style that they play at, I think, just gives them a really, really good chance against everyone. Obviously, their slow style creates variance, even on their end. Like they've shown that they can lose to a lot of different styles, a lot of different teams. Like Missouri State took them to overtime twice. They were thankfully able to win those games, but it just goes to show that this style of play creates a lot of variance, and they could potentially lead them to go on a run.
Yeah, for sure. So, that pretty much wraps up our mid-major sleepers episode, right? Just to recap: UC San Diego, High Point, Liberty, VCU, and Drake. Five mid-majors we could definitely see going on a big run. But I'm sure there'll be others that we didn't mention that end up going on the runs. So enjoy the madness that is March Madness.